All right, hi. 62780, Florida Department of Environmental, Florida Administration Codes, containment site criteria, containment site cleanup criteria 682, 780, 600. Sorry. Site assessment: full all sites except the brownfield site, unless the discharge is D minus discharge and address for the pursuant of the requirements of Rule 62, 785, 50 or 62, 785, 560. The person responsible for site rehabilitation shall commence with the site assessment within 60 days after the discharge is discovered. For the purpose of the site assessment, commence with the means of the person responsible for site rehabilitation has employed with the contractor with the professional engineer, geologist, unable to complete the requirements for this section, has given them the professional authority to proceed with the work required with the person responsible for site rehabilitation conduct the site assessment in accordance with the requirements of the rule for the time frames in Table A, allowed for located at the end of the Rule 62, 780, 900 Florida Administration Codes that are computer aided cleanup added agreement documentation if available. The brown sites may be because the site assessment activities may have already been completed. The brownfield site and sites where the designated brownfield area prior to the execution of the Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Act. Person responsible for site rehabilitation or agreement. Person responsible for site rehabilitation may choose to submit the Department of Review associated assessment documents for the site assessment report pursuant to subsection 62780-608. If the assessment work is necessary to define the nature extent of the contamination of the brownfield site and sites with the designated brownfield area, the site assessment shall be completed in accordance with the time frames specified by the Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Agreement. The facility of the site assessment process. The person responsible for the site rehabilitation may have the discussion within the department of the various discussion points to the established scope and the methodology of the site assessment, applicable exposure factors, the remedial strategy for the site, risk management, and options based on the current projected land use for the site. The objectives in the site assessment should be the following: as applicable to evaluate the current exposure potential risk for the exposure of humans and environmental, including the multiple pathways, exposure, physical, chemical, biological characters for each of the contamination. Individual site characteristics shall be considered. The individual site characteristics include: 1. The current and projected for the use of the affected groundwater, surface water, and vicinity of the site, the current and projected land use of the area affected with the contamination, the exposed human population, ecological and receptors, including the present threatened and endangered species, flora and fauna, the general literature review and analysis based on the site of the specific conditions by sufficient location of the plume, the degree of the extent of the contamination, the rate and direction of mitigation of the plume, the air apparent and potential rate of the degradation of the contamination with the natural institution, the potential for further mitigation in relation to the source of property boundary. B. To determine whether the contamination is present and the type of the contamination present for the determination of the horizontal and vertical extent of the contamination in every medium found with the be contained for the soil and unsaturated zone with the more stringent for the direct exposure residential soil cleanup target levels, applicable leachability to base soil cleanup target level provided in this chapter 62777 Florida Administration Code Table 2 and the groundwater clean target level. The surface water clean target levels are provided in Chapter 2, 62777 Florida Administration Code Table 1 is applicable. To determine and confirm the origin of the source of the contamination, the technologically feasible with the discharge of the petroleum products to determine the form of the source of the contaminant for the extent practicable to estimate the volume of the petroleum products that was released. Confirmation shall include the determination of the structural integrity in accordance with the testing procedures specified in Chapter 62761, 62762 Florida Administration Codes. Any petroleum storage tank system that exists with the property is likely to be considered contamination to establish background concentration. They establish the horizontal extent thickness of the free product technological feasible. The soil concentration of the contamination is above the soil saturation concentration. The free product may be represented with refer to the technical pool reference in subsection 62780-102 Florida Administration Code for the development of soil and cleanup target levels based on the CSAT, or the soil saturation. Determine whether such removal, in addition with the interim source removal already performed pursuant to 62.780.500, is warranted. To describe the relevant geological, hydrogeological character for the influence, mitigation, transport of the contains in the site unless site meets with no further action criteria of the subsection 62.780.680.1 Florida Administration Code to describe the lithology and the horizontal vertical continuity of the units, such as presence on karst, features, bedrock, native soil, fill material, and areas affected with expected to be affected by the discharge. To identify aquifer or aquifers confining the units expected to affected by the discharge, to determine the groundwater classification, hydrological, conductivity, transmittive, the strativative aquifers and aquifers. To identify the characteristics of the peat or any breach zone if present, and determine the horizontal, vertical, and direction of the groundwater at all effective depth, and as appropriate to determine the extent of the water table fluctuation, the extent of the potential eventually serious variation, vertical ground flow, the components of the rate directive of the ground flow of the water, determine the hydrological interaction between the groundwater and any of the surface water within the vicinity of the site, determine whether there are any tidal effects to the site located within the new marine surface water, to determine other mechanisms transport contamination in immediate vicinity of the site, including the rate, direction, movement of contaminations, and sewer line subsurfaces, utility conduits, and all soil sediment surface waters that are applicable. H. To determine the means of the well survey, whether they are public water supply wells as defined in Chapter 62.550 Florida Administration Codes is present within 1/2 mile of the radius of the site, with the site located with a regulated well-headed protection zone, a public water supply well or well field, whether the private water supply wells include potable irrigation and industrial wells are in contamination between the bounds of the property at which the site rehabilitation was initiated pursuant to this chapter, is discovered at any time within 60 days of such discovery, the person responsible for site rehabilitation shall conduct the well survey pursuant to chapter paragraph 62.780.605.0. Submit the report of the department to the county health department and then provide the result of the well survey in accordance with the requirements of paragraph 62.780.680A 10, 670, 1011 Florida Administration Code that provided results of the required sampling pursuant to paragraph 62.780.680.105P. Florida Administration Code based on the result of the well survey. The result shall include the list of sampled wells rational for the selection contamination analyzed for the analytical reports to determine whether any surface water will be exposed to contamination mitigated beyond the boundaries of the property. The site rehabilitation was initiated with the chapter to report off-property activities, for example, dewatering activity, remediation, flood control pumping in the immediate vicinity of the site. They may have an effect with the groundwater with the flow of the site unless the site meets the no further criteria action, section 62.780.680 Florida Administration Codes, to facilitate the selection of remedial strategy for the site the protection of human health and environment of the considered the property proposed. The use identifies proposed with the contamination based on the proposed. Describe how the risk was and will managed by the use of no further action is deemed appropriate pursuant to the paragraph precision 62.780.680. 81 Florida Administration Codes. For the analysis of the contamination surface water, groundwater supply, sediment samples applicable shall be performed using the appropriate analytical procedures per reference and listed in Chapter 62.160 Florida Administration Code. The initial analysis of the contaminations include the reaction, degradation, products shall be made based on site history. A. For the discharge of the dry cleaning cells, analysis should be performed with applicable contamination for the concern listed in Table B for the chapter located at the end of the Rule 62.780.900. For the discharge of petroleum and petroleum products, analysis should be performed with the applicable contaminants for the concern listed in Table B for the chapter as follows. 1. If the petroleum product discharged from gasoline or kerosene, analytical groups analyzed shall be performed and described in Table C located in Rule 62.780.900, except for the site is anticipated to meet no further action criteria. Rule 62.780.680 Florida Administration Code that the site is contaminated product solely for the gasoline analytical group. The analytical screen with the monitoring wells of the benzene, ethyl benzoin, toluene, or total X-lines, MTBE, or PA, public pollution, air hazard, using applicable methods in Table C for the performed If the site is anticipated to meet no further action criteria of Rule 62, 780, 680, the site is contaminated by the product of the kerosene analytical group. The analytical screen with the monitoring wells of benzene, ethyl benzene, toluene, total X line, MTBE, pollution, air hazard, and TRPHS using applicable methods of Table C may be performed. If the petroleum product discharges are used with the oil, they identify the product not listed with the gasoline kerosene analytical group from a product with which specifies identity of the unknown analysis shall be performed and described in Table D, but located at the end of Rule 62, 780, 900. If the contamination is derived from the petroleum analysis should be performed and described in Table D, located at the end of the Rule 62, 780, 900, and the site assessment shall include the task necessary to achieve the objectives described in subsection 62, 780, 603, including the following as applicable. A. The use of geological physical equipment with such magnetometers, the ground permitted radar, metal detectors to detect storage tank systems using borehole geological system, physical equipment methods to determine geological, hydrological characteristics affected with potentially effective hydrological zones. Sampling of the soil for the unsaturated zone with the criteria is applicable. The appropriate laboratory analysis to determine the degree and extent of the soil contamination is applicable. The background concentration soil samples be collected with a sufficient number of locations in the unsaturated zone based on the horizontal concentration, horizontal and vertical extent of the contamination. Samples shall be collected in 2-foot intervals unless the sample intervals are adjusted. It is necessary to account the factors such as the discrete variation in lithology, the depth of the water table, the point of the discharge, the chemical and physical properties of the contaminants. If the superficial discharge of the metals and semi-volatile organic compounds is now known or is suspected, the sample intervals should be follows. Land surfaces to 6 inches to 2 feet, 2 feet intervals. Therefore, after extra extent necessary to define the soil contamination, if 95% of the upper confidence limit approach the pursuant to the subparagraph 62, 780, 680, 1B1 and 62, 780, 680, 2B1 and 62, 780, 638, 3B1 is utilized. The soil sampling shall be sufficiently identified in the area of the highest contamination concentration. Allow the calculation of exposure unit average concentration. Refer to the technical report reference in subsection 260, 780, 100 in Florida Administration Guidance. Measurement of appropriate soil for the texture, pH, moisture content, dry bulk density, organic carbon content, infiltration rate with using the testing method specified in Chapter 62.777. Table 3 with such properties are chosen for the development and alternatives to cleanup target levels according to the technical report reference in subsection 62.780, 102. For administration codes, if the soil of the property is shown to be used and measurements shall be made on the soil with the contaminated area with the feasible. If the measurement within the contaminated area is not feasible, measurement may be made on the soil alternative location with the soil sample tab using the Department of Agricultural and Natural Resource Conservation soil survey maps or the Unified Soil Classification System. Person responsible for site rehabilitation may propose the use of other data on the soil properties. Fractional laboratory analysis of the TRHPHS is determine the site for specific concentration of the TRPH fraction exceeding the soil cleanup target levels of the TRPH fractions developed using subclassification methodology described in Appendix C of this technical report reference in subsection 62.780, 102. Fractional and Florida PRO analysis of TRPH shall be performed on subsamples for at least 1 gram soil sample collected with each of the source of the areas exceed with this applicable default soil cleanup target levels for the TRPHSs specified in Chapter 62.777, Florida Administration Code, Table 2. Alternative soil cleanup target levels TRPH establishes pursuant to Rule 62.780, 680. Florida Administration Code with actual numbers of samples based on the horizontal and vertical extent of the contamination on site-specific stratigraphically. Direct leachability using the testing by using U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the test method 1312 of synthetic perception leaching procedure extraction. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency test method 1311 toxicity characteristic leaking procedure extraction for the contamination derived from the use of oil, soil, petroleum products filed with the appropriate analysis of leachability, total soil concentration analysis, appropriate laboratory analysis performed with the subsamples for at least 1 gram soil sample collected from each of the soil sources of the areas exceeding exceeding the applicable leakability based on the control and cleanup target levels specified in subparagraph 62780-680-1B Florida Administration Codes and established pursuant to subparagraph 62780-680-2B2 and 3B or 3B2, with the actual number of the samples based on the horizontal vertical extent of the contamination site specific stratigraphy. Hazardous waste characteristics by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency tested method 1311 TCLP extraction valve with the appropriate analysis of the latch with the information that indicates the soil that is potential or hazardous waste contamination does not result in solely for the manufactured gas plant waste. Sampling of undisturbed soil above the below the water table using augers, hollow stem augers with split spoons, Shelby tubes, direct push technology, other applicable technology to obtain information on the site stratigraph and non-aqueous phase liquid and trapped below the water table to determine the geotechnical parameters, vertical, hydraulic, conductive, the confining, semi-confining zones to assess the appropriateness of the natural tuition program using a fractured trace analysis to discover linear zones in which the discrete flow could take place. Use fielded soil screening techniques which shall be demonstrated in appropriate site condition, physical, chemical characteristics, contaminations. Determine the optimal location for the collection of sample of laboratory analysis. The analysis should be performed a minimum of a 3-grab sample of the high, medium, and low screenings results on the site. These analyses should be performed per scores area per sample event, except when the only representative sample collected with the area most likely to be contaminated shall be sufficient in field screening results indicating with the contaminated soil is not present. The actual number of laboratory samples shall be based on the horizontal vertical extent of the contamination and the degree of the correlation between the field and the soil screen laboratory result. Used for the visual observation to determine whether the soil is contaminated, saturated. Used for the presence of the soil contaminated, saturated. Used with the identified with at least 1 grab sample. The most visible stain edge shall be collected with the analysis for the use of oil parameters and listed in D. Table D. If no visual signs contained with are identified with the soil sample, laboratory analysis is not required unless the oil contamination is previously reported, in which case 1 grab sample shall be collected in laboratory analysis. The location where used the oil was identified in the past shall be analyzed by the ZOH, pH, and TRPHs and PCBs. Arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead. If soil visually is strained with the saturated used oil excavated pursuant to paragraph 62780-505A. And at least 1 grab sample at the bottom of the excavation. If the water table does not reach the least of the grab sample of the wall excavation of the equivalent depth of the strain with the saturated soil removed from the shell contained with the analysis. Samples shall be analyzed with the contaminants detected in the sample collected with the most visible stain area of the sample collected with the disposal purpose to conform the contaminated soil was removed. Using piezometer with monitoring wells to determine the frequency, occurrence, the horizontal, vertical extent, thickness of free product, the monitoring wells, the piezometer, other sampling measurement techniques to obtain 3-dimensional evaluation source of contamination, mitigation, contaminations below the water table, the groundwater flow. Of relevant hydrological parameters using piezometer wells and monitoring horizontal distance, direction, groundwater flow, and the horizontal vertical hydro gradient applicable to groundwater level measurements shall be made with a 24-hour period. Survey every tap of the casing of the natural geodectic vertical datum of 1929, the vertical American vertical datum of 1988 for the petroleum and petroleum product discharge with a single benchmark of the attributed evaluation for the latter option of the as used the survey is completed with the closing the lab loop with the pair with the adjacent monitoring wells piezometer in which first top casing served. Using a field screen a technique, for example, the temporary wells piezometer direct push technology to obtain the groundwater samples on-site analysis for the use of the grass chromatography to optimize well placement. Sampling monitoring wells is appropriate with the laboratory analysis, which most of the recent samples representative of the monitoring wells have occurred within no more than 250 days prior to the site assessment report. Submittal to determine the degree of the extent of the groundwater contamination, background concentration, if applicable. Such 1 drill cutting, drilling mud generated during the monitoring well installation shall be handled with disposed in such a manner that the contamination is not spread to the previous uncontaminated, less contaminated media. Authorization pursuant to the rule does not relieve the person responsible for site realization for the obligation to comply with the Rules, for example, the Chapter 62.701 and 62.730. For handling, disposing, containing media, the person responsible for site rehabilitation advised that the federal and local regulations must apply to the development of water and purged water shall be handled and disposed in each such manner. Contamination is not spread into previously uncontaminated, less contaminated media. Alteration pursuant to the rules does not relieve the person responsible for site rehabilitation or obligation to comply with the department rules. For example, Chapter 62.701, Chapter 62.730 for the handling and disposal of contaminated media. The person responsible for site rehabilitation advised that the federal and local laws regulation must apply. The intern source removal was performed with no further action pursuant to subsection 62.780. 680 will be recommended with only the following criteria shall be met with pursuant to 62, 780, 690. If the ground contaminant was part of the interim source removal, the groundwater concentration will meet the number of no further action criteria subsection 62, 780, 681 for at least 2 consecutive sample events of representative monitoring wells performed with a minimum of 3 months apart. If the soil contaminant was only present with an unsaturated zone prior to the interim source removal, the groundwater concentration shall meet no further reaction criteria subsection 62, 780, 680 during only the sample event with the representative monitoring wells and the sample source of surface of the water sediment and appropriate laboratory analysis determine the degree extent of the surface water sediment and contamination with the background concentration if applicable. Inspection of public water records such as the local Department of Health office and the appropriate waste management district office, local municipalities performance of the field reconnaissance as appropriate to locate all water wells and all supply wells, including potting, irrigation, industrial wells, pursuant to paragraph 62, 780, 603H, for administration of injection wells and drainage wells defined in 62, 528. If possible, exists with contamination may affect the public-private water supply with sampling of the well was well appropriated laboratory analysis with the consent of the owner to determine whether the contamination is present. Use availability of proof of literature with conjunction with the site-specific lithology, logic logs, and identifying of the aquifers present beneath the site, and analysis of the total dissolved solids when they should be included with the person or site responsible site report rehabilitation chief to demonstrate the department that the background quality of the groundwater on the site which would allow it to be classified by the area of G3 groundwater are performance tests defining the aquifer characteristics appropriate in the different strata at the superficial aquifer or the different aquifers applicable to water table, the monitoring wells, immediate depth water, vertical extent monitoring walls, performance of the pumping test for derived remedial action plan with groundwater extraction proposed pursuant to provision 62, 780, 700. If the pump test is already performed with a plume, at least 2 samples of groundwater withdrawn during the test shall be collected and analyzed. Appropriate contamination, physical properties, for example, hardness, iron, total dissolved solids, total suspended solids that make effect with the treatment system, disposal options, a minimum of 1 sample shall be collected at the midpoint pumping test, 1 at the end of the pumping test. Review of the historical lands with the recorded existing aerial photographs to determine whether the paths of the properties of the location previous to the storage systems. Alright, T, performance of the professional land survey, the petroleum contaminant system in order to develop an accurate base map. If the department determines that the site provided with the report is not accurate, the establishment parameters, exposure assumptions that will be used to develop the alternative cleanup target levels pursuant to Rule 62, 780, 650, and the person responsible for site rehabilitation shows the option. 6. If there is no historical evidence certain contamination being used within the site, initial testing was represented monitoring well performed pursuant to subsection 6780, 6404, and 5 does not indicate the presence of any contamination. Specific analytical procedure indicate that the presence of contamination due to the background concentration subsequent testing the site needed to include the analytical procedure within the time frame of the table A with the computer aided the cleanup agreement documenting the person responsible for the site rehabilitation should submit the department for the review electronic paper with the site assessment report that may reference the previously submitted documents for review. The site assessment report A shall summarize all the tasks completed with the pursuant subsection 67, 80, 603, 4, and 5 with furnish summarizing the results obtained. All maps shall indicate the northern direction be drawn scale, including the graphical representation scale following that shall be included with the applicable discharge being assessed. 1. Detailed summary of the site history of operations, including a definition of present real property of the facility owners, a description of the past and present operations, including those involved with the storage, treatment, and use of disposal, processing, manufacturing materials that may potent contamination sources, and a description of all the known products that use in the manufacture and all known products, byproducts, waste, including waste constitutes generally during the life of the facility. D. A summary of the concurrent with the positive environmental permits of the enforcement action. Somebody known as spills release of materials, including permitted release that may contain the contamination sources. A copy of the portion used must be used with the USGS topographical maps, including the quadrangle name and scale contour intervals labeling clearly identified with the site relation to surrounding area. 3. A vicinity map shall show the percent and features such as the local drain features, land to cover the property boundary, supply wells, particularly any potential off-property source contamination identified during the assessment. If applicable and available, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection identification number shall be provided. If the person responsible for site rehabilitation prefers, aerial photos may be submitted with the complete with the vicinity map and the subject of the site. No further error action criteria for subsection 6278681. Vicinity map is not required. One of the more scaled site maps has shown pertinent surface and subsurface features of the building, former current tank farms, integral piping, dispensers, utility sewers, floor drains, drain lines above and underground storage and storage tank areas. Alright, monitoring wells, land cover, the streets, and right-of-way location evaluation is significantly different from the property boundaries surrounding properties present with the immediate vicinity of the contamination. A map of the individual contamination discharge location, including latitude and longitudinal coordinates with known discharge, detail of the preliminary assessment, interim source with removal activities performed at the site, such as free product of the recovery, groundwater recovery, contaminated soil removal of the contamination site, sediment removal, summarized graphical and tabular form, data collections used to determine at the top of the closing casing and evaluation accuracy survey that performed pursuant to paragraph 62, 780, 605K. Tables in the top of the case evaluation screen, the intervals, depth of the ground's water level elevations obtained at least twice or once a month apart with the dates of the data obtained. The scale site maps that illustrate with the water level evaluation calculate each of the monitoring piezometer shaft gauge when the surface of water is concerned, depicting the estimated evaluation contours of interpretation, groundwater flow direction. If the different strata of the same aquifer, the different aquifers and are affected, separate figures shall be submitted for each of the day of the measurement was recorded depicting the flowing of the stratum and aquifer. The site of the groundwater is entirely influenced. Separated figures shall be submitted depicting the flow of the high-low tide. If the site is affected with the seasonal groundwater variation, separate figures shall be submitted depicting the seasonal change of the groundwater flow direction. 10. A table of the summarized the use of the well construction details available local location information, the nearest street, the address for the applicable available latitude and longitude count ordinance, but the street address is not available. All the water supplies wells identified during the well survey performed pursuant to paragraph 62, 780, 603H. 11. A map show the approximate location water supply wells identified during the well survey performed and pursuant to paragraph 62, 780, 603H. Florida Administration Code in relation to subject site. 12. The result of the slug site and the slug test, minimum of 3 monitoring wells from pumping testing performed in each of the selected aquifer monitored to determine aquifer properties, including description method, assumption of made field data calculations, unless the site made for no further criteria. Subsection 62, 780, 680, Florida Administration Codes. Alright, 13. Result of the calculation horizontal groundwater flow velocity for the site formula. V is equal to Ki divided by Nk is the average horizontal hydraulic conductivity. I is the average horizontal hydraulic gradient, and N is the estimated effective soil porosity unless there meets no further action criteria. Subsection 62, 780, 681 Florida Administration Codes. 14. The result of the calculation vertical groundwater flow for the velocity for the site using the formula VKI divided by the N. The K is now average vertical hydroconductivity of the confining semi-confining zone. Average vertical hydraulic gradient is N is estimated of the effective source porosity unless the site meets no further criteria in subsection 67, 681 Florida Administration Codes. 15. A description of geophysical methods are used for project. The description of site-specific stratigraph degree based on lithological prepared during a soil assessment, monitoring where insulation on standard penetration testing boards, including composition, thickness, continuity of various lithological units. At least two cross-sectional relative to the NGVD of 1929 and NVAVD of 1988, the petroleum product discharged with a single benchmark attributed to evaluation illustrate the site-specific stratigraph, approximate concentration of the applicable contamination, detail of any other assessment methodology of the use site, including the field screening techniques, measuring the biological activity, for example, the dissolved oxygen and nutrient table levels. 19. The table summarizes the field soil screening levels obtained with each of the sample location, depth, and listing of the date worked with to perform one of the more cited scale. The maps also show the all sampled and location field screening laboratory analysis in relation with the former and current source of the contamination of any of the excavated areas that illustrate the horizontal and vertical extent of the unsaturated zone of soil containment. When the soil containment is detected, piezometer monitoring, welling, recovery well construction, detailed construction diagrams, including methods, materials, field samples, data sheets, lithological logs, methods, volumes of the groundwater moved during the well development, description of the treatment, the disposal method of investigation, derived water, waste, and generated during the assessment, place, phase, documentation confirms proper treatment of the proper disposal of the waste is applicable. Or the table is updated with the time and additional periods or minute monitoring wells, recovery wells is installed with the summarized well construction details, including top casing evaluated reference to NGVD 1920 and 1988, or petroleum product discharge is a single benchmark arbitrary evaluation depth at the top of the screen below the land surface and total depth of the screen length of the ground surface evaluation, the NGVD of 1920 or the NVD of 1989. 1988 for petroleum product discharge with a single benchmark with attribution evaluation. All monitoring wells include the distortion in compliance with all the other compliance wells required permanent piezometer recovery wells. 24. Current table of summarized free product with the measured volumes recovered and dated with the measurement where the recorded is applicable. Scaled site map shows the estimated horizontal extent of the free product as applicable information by the subsection 62, 780, 300 full administration codes. Separate tables of medium soil, sediment, groundwater, surface water, the list of contaminants detected and corresponding clean target levels based on the reasons for the alternative clean target levels, detection limits achieved with non-detected analytes, and analyze, perform, and summarize all available analytical results. And one or more of the scaled site maps that shows the areas of excavated all groundwater, surface water, sampling location, illustrated the degree of extent of the groundwater, surface water, and contamination using significant isocentric concentration lines to help identify the source as well as the extent of the plumb. Summarize the conclusion regarding the site assessment objectives and then include subsection 62, 780, 603, including one of the following. Or no further action proposal without the institutional controls. Without institutional energy and engineering controls shall be included with the site meets with the applicable no further criteria action subsection 62, 780, 680, or no further action proposal installation controls. Both installation and engineering controls may be included if the site meets the applicable no further criteria with the subsection 62, 780, 680, 2 and 3. A natural tuition monitoring plan may be included with the site that meets the natural tuition monitoring criteria with the Rule 62, 780, 690. Recommendation prepared with the risk assessment. Risk assessment work plan shall be included with the person responsible for the site rehabilitation. Choose to justify the alternative cleanup target levels using the risk assessment study to demonstrate that the human health, public safety, and environmental are protected at least to the degree provided with the subsection 376-307-01, 376-3071, 376-3078, and 376-81. If applicable, the work plan it shall include the scheduled completion risk assessment documentation adequate support with the request due to one or more of the tasks element subsection 627A 651. Florida Administration Code shall specify the parameters, exposure exemptions, assumptions that will be used to develop the alternative cleanup target levels pursuant to Rule 62, 780, 650 Florida Administration Code. Recommendation preparing the remedial action pursuant to Rule 62, 780, 700 shall include, unless the recommendation purpose of subparagraph 62, 780, 608B and 1, 2, and 3 is included, the department shall provide a person responsible for site rehabilitation with a written approval of the site assessment report. If there is no further action proposal approved and the site rehabilitation completion order is referenced in subsection 62, 780, 680, if the natural tuition monitoring plan is approved, the natural tuition monitoring plan approval is referenced in paragraph 62, 780, 690, and 5A. If the risk assessment work plan is recommendation prior to the risk assessment approved within the written notification, risk assessment shall be prepared pursuant to 62, 780, 650. If the recommendation prepared, the remedial action is approved with written notification, remedial action shall be prepared and pursuant to 62, 780, 700. Notify the person responsible for the site rehabilitation stating the reason for why the site assessment report does not contain information adequate to support a conclusion regarding the applicable site assessment objective obtained with the subsection 62, 780, 600, the Florida Administration Code. The reason with the proposal of the plan recommendation submitted with the pursuant paragraph 62, 780, 600, 8B of the Florida Administration Code is not supported with the applicable criteria. The site assessment report is incomplete with respect to the insufficient satisfy the objective of the subsection 62, 780, 600. Florida Administration Code. The department shall interfere with the person responsible for site rehabilitation perform pursuant to paragraph 62, 780, 609B of the Florida Administration Code. The person responsible for site rehabilitation shall submit the department for the review electronic paper for the copy of the site assessment report, addendum of the address with the deficiency within 60 days after the receipt of notice. Rules, authority 3763033, 3763071, 376307001, 3763078, 4, 37681, 4038877. Implemented 3763071, 376307001, 3763078, 37681, 4030877. Florida History News, April 17, 2005, June 12, 2013, and February 4th, 2014.